This is bad. I am not doing well.
The week of July 4th, 2023, my buddy Brian and I decided to revisit one of our favorite hikes from last summer. We wanted to go back into the Bears Lake Basin Granite Park area within the Sierras. Our trip there last year was so much fun, but because this area is so massive, we saw just this tiny little segment. So we wanted to get back up in there and go a different direction, go over a different pass, see how much more of this area we could experience. Now we knew, because of the winter we had just had, that we would still be dealing with some late season snow. So we carried all of our winter safety equipment and we thought we were prepared. Now, anyone who's been into the backcountry can tell you, the moment you think you've got it all figured out, nature finds a way to prove you wrong. Pine Creek Canyon again. You might remember this area from the last Bears Lake Basin video series that I did. This trip's a little different. There's still some significant snow, and the creeks are insane. I cannot believe the volume of water that's running through some of these areas right now. Not looking forward to some of the big creek crossings we have today. We've been hiking for about 2 hours, and we've already gained 2,000 feet. So we have about 2,000 more to go before we can camp. And then that's sort of depending on where we decide to camp. We could go up 3,200 feet total for today, or we could go up about 45. And it really just depends on where the snow line is, what the creek crossings look like, how quickly we're moving. We're moving at a pretty good pace right now. Like I say, we're about 2 hours in. We've already gained 2,000 feet of elevation, so we're moving at a comfortable pace. Not winning any races, but also not having any heart attacks. So this area is stunning. I'm so happy to be back here. It's such a beautiful place. This trip definitely carries a little bit of extra spice with all the snow, and we had a nearly 300% snow year down in this area, particular, kind of the southern end of this part of the Sierras. So it's going to be interesting. I had the exact same thought right there. We encountered large patches of snow and a significant amount of snowmelt runoff at a much lower elevation than we were anticipating. None of that was really a big deal. We knew that these were conditions that we were going to encounter on this hike, but I gotta admit, it was a little bit unsettling to see so much of it at these lower elevations. This is a July afternoon, and it was warm. It was probably mid to upper 70s, maybe dipping into the 80s a little bit. And so we were seeing so much runoff and just so much swift moving water so early in the day. I had thought we would see all that quite a bit later. So we're at the first major creek crossing. Brian made it across, and I got really vertigo-y, if that's a word. My head started spinning, my legs started shaking. I'm gonna try to find a different way. Well, I made it. Found a slower moving section towards the outlet of the lake. It was very deep, very deep. My little privates got wet and cold. It was freezing. I can't even put into words how cold that water was. So we are having a shoes off in the sun lunch break. Shortly after that first water crossing, we had our first major snow obstacle. It was a kind of long, sort of steep slab that was undercut by lake water. We chose to take a much higher line across the slab to avoid any areas that could potentially crack off and dump us into the lake. It was a fairly easy traverse with not much really to worry about, and it was kind of nice actually to get it out of the way and know that, okay, we can move across these kind of obstacles fairly easily. Well, we made it across the third and longest water crossing. From here, should be pretty smooth sailing. Some more snow drifts and then a lake. Well, good morning. We made it to Honeymoon Lake yesterday, 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. I kind of ran around and grabbed some scenery footage and things like that. And then Brian and I had a pretty lengthy conversation about what to do. There was some debate about whether to go over this saddle behind me and head into the Royce Lakes yesterday, or camp here and go into the Royce Lakes this morning. Kind of the root of the debate was that getting up into Royce Lakes is going to be some more technical hiking than we've been doing for the beginning of this trip. We're going to have to put on the boots, put the shoes away, break out the crampons and the ice axes and things like that. And so ultimately we decided just to stay at Honeymoon Lake last night, and then we would
attempt to get into the Royce Lakes this morning. And, after setting up camp, getting water, having that lengthy conversation, I just didn't feel like talking to the camera. So I'm talking to you now. So that's the plan for this morning. So we're gonna head over that saddle there and try to get into Royce Lakes. Probably miserable to get there. We made it up the first kind of main obstacle. Went pretty good. A little bit steeper than I was comfortable with, but we picked a route that was pretty low consequence. So even if we did fall, we weren't going very far. And thankfully, nobody fell. Everything went pretty smoothly. So super glad we didn't try to do this last night, because I am already tired, and we would have started tired last night. And that could have added a little extra danger to the situation. Poor foot placement, things like that. When you're exhausted, you're not really thinking super clearly. So I'm glad we did this after a full night's sleep. We got a fairly early start in the morning, a little bit later than I would have liked, but the snow was still very solid for the first several miles. It was pretty easy to move through with our crampons on. Now, crampons aren't a tool that you can just throw on and immediately use. There's a definite technique to using crampons efficiently, and unfortunately, I am not that proficient with them. Brian has had a lot more experience and a lot more training with the crampons, so as we were moving up this incredibly steep terrain, he was teaching me technique as we went along. The basic technique is you want to think of your foot and your boot in the same way you would think of your arm and your elbow when you're swinging a hammer. It's a very similar motion, and it's really important to swing that boot and swing that crampon in such a way that you're getting a full bite with those spikes. Now, as the day warmed up and the snow softened up, the technique became less effective, but more important, because the danger was increasing with each passing hour.
Well, we made it to our second campsite. We're right in between upper and middle Royce lakes. Well, today's miles were not long. They were very difficult, and there was a lot of elevation gain. I'm pretty exhausted, pretty sunburned. Really happy to be out of the sun right now. Was using 50 SPF and putting it on all day and still got pretty burned. But we're at a campsite. Brian went off to explore the area a little more, and I think I'm gonna take a nap. So Brian's been gone a couple hours. I'm pretty sure he went to try to summit Merriam Peak. He'd been talking about that all day. He and I are very different hikers. There are things that excite him that do not excite me about hiking and backpacking, and vice versa. Some of the things that I really enjoy are just, to him, just kind of the work you need to get done to get to the other thing. And he's a big fan of summiting things. Feeling a little bit of guilt for having not gone with him. I'm sure he's fine, but, you know, he felt like maybe we should have stuck together, but I was so tired and just so ready to relax. Took a good solid nap, and then I've just been sitting in the shade of this giant boulder here because it's the coolest place I could find at our campsite. It's still oppressively hot, but I'm enjoying myself. Like, I'm enjoying the relaxation. I'm enjoying this alone time. But in the back of my mind, maybe I should have gone with him. Maybe we should have stuck together.
About 15 minutes later, I saw Brian working his way back towards the campsite, and I felt such a sense of relief to see him moving his way back across that snowfield. He had indeed made an attempt to summit Merriam Peak. It was ultimately unsuccessful, but he made it pretty close. He had given himself a turnaround time so that he would be back at camp before sunset, and he stuck to that turnaround time. He made the smart choice and came back. But I was very relieved when I saw him working his way back towards our campsite. As we sat around camp and watched all the local animals run around and collect food and watched the sun start to dip behind the massive granite peaks surrounding the Royce Lakes, I started to feel kind of ill. I knew that I needed to eat dinner. I knew that we needed to sort of start that process, but I just didn't feel like it. My body just didn't want food. I didn't have the energy to dig my stove out. I didn't have the energy to even decide what I wanted to eat. I was not feeling well, and I don't know if it was overexertion or sun exposure or some combination of the two, but I was definitely not doing well.
From what Brian saw yesterday when he was up on Miriam Pass, getting into the Granite Park or into Bear Lake Basin is not going to happen this trip. There's just too much snow. All the passes are socked in and have overhanging cornices. It's not going to happen. So the plan for today is either to hike back down to Honeymoon Lake or down to one of the Pine Lakes. And I'm leaning towards the Pine Lakes because they are in the shade. They have trees and I can get out of the sun. My sunburn is bad. I mean, you can see it. I'm very uncomfortable. I was putting sunscreen on every hour to 2 hours yesterday as we were working our way up to the pass to get to Royce Lakes.
But I think just with the combination of it being so hot and completely cloudless all day, and then the UV bouncing back up into my face from the snow, it just wasn't enough. I should have been putting on more sunscreen. I thought every hour, 2 hours was going to be fine, but clearly I was mistaken. So today, as we hike, I brought this kind of headband, not really a buff, but a similar thing. I'm just going to cover my whole face. I'm going to wear my gloves, long pants, long shirt, hood up. Just try to protect myself as much as I can from it getting any worse. This is bad. I am not doing well.
As we left our campsite at Royce Lakes, both the conditions of the snow and my health started to go downhill pretty quickly. The snow was already deeply sun-cupped, and as it became softer and softer, it became very difficult to navigate through. My overall health was deteriorating pretty quickly. I was struggling to keep water down. I was struggling even to drink like electrolytes or eat any food or anything like that. So we were trying to balance, our safety concerns for the environment that we were in, but also my health concerns, and trying to move at a relatively quick pace so that we could set up camp and I could lay down again. We decided to go to Honeymoon Lake rather than the Pine Lakes because going to the Pine Lakes would require doing all 3 of those creek crossings again. And in the condition I was in, it didn't seem a very smart idea to throw me into rushing water without getting another good night's sleep. You can go into these trips as prepared as possible in terms of your fitness level and your gear choices and things like that, but there are certain things that are beyond your control. I certainly never anticipated getting sick on the trail. I'm aware that it's a possibility, but it's not a thing you can really prepare for. Ultimately, we made it home safe. We didn't have to call search and rescue or anything like that. And honestly, it was still kind of a good trip.